a parking structure transformed into vertical forest apartments overnight. 40 deaths, one technology, 91% reduction. April 2026, Tesla, Waymo, 2 events, 1 Cascade. The quantum leap. It's 2040. You walk through downtown Austin, no traffic lights. No parking structures, a silent pod arrives, door opens. You never owned a car, most people here never did. This isn't speculation, the Cascade started this year. The quantum leap takes you where real science builds futures. Everything ahead is backed by real data, not yet finished. Today, 2 fields that didn't know they were connected. Autonomous vehicles and urban planning, one future neither predicted. Separately, each story is impressive. Together, they're civilization scale. Let's start in the current city, not the future. 22% of city downtown is dedicated to parking. Not roads, parking, machines that sit unused 95%. In Los Angeles County alone, 14% is parking. UCLA professor Donald Shoup spent 30 years documenting this problem. His book showed mandatory parking minimums warp city economies. For 80 years, nobody wanted to hear it. Minneapolis became the first U.S. city to eliminate minimums. Buffalo followed, then a dozen more cities began drafting. 22% downtown, locked in concrete for 80 years. What happens when technology finally catches up to research? The answer arrived in April 2026, 2 days, 2 places. First, Tesla started building a car with no steering wheel. Not a concept vehicle, production, at Gigafactory, Texas. Second, Waymo drove into London, its first city abroad. These weren't separate stories, they were a signal. The commercial tipping point urban planners had been waiting for. Now let's trace what the science shows and doesn't. Waymo published its safety data in June 2025. Stark numbers. 100 million driverless miles, 4 cities, 91% fewer fatals. 40 Americans die on roads yearly, 90% human error. 91% reduction equals eliminating drunk driving entirely, statistically. Self-driving cars perceive in all directions simultaneously. They never fatigue. Human drivers look forward 98% of the time, always. Safety baseline, peer-reviewed, replicated, not a press release. 90% crash reduction saves $20 billion annually in medical. Safety data alone doesn't explain why this is civilizational. For that, you need the urban economists, more radical numbers. In Manhattan alone, parking land exceeds $30 billion in value. In Tokyo, parking spaces cost more than the cars parked. Science Direct research, freed parking land lowers housing costs, confirmed. More land supply means more housing, lower rents. Not projection, basic land economics confirmed by peer review. Before going further, there's a critical distinction here. Waymo's safety record is peer-reviewed, replicated across 100 million miles. Urban land transformation, a projection, compelling but still a projection. Safety threshold already crossed, urban transformation underway but incomplete. Safety data or economics which drives cities faster, comments. Second convergence thread, cities changing their rules right now. After World War II, American cities passed mandatory parking minimums. Every new building required minimum parking spaces, by law. These laws distorted 80 years of urban economics entirely. But nobody saw what was coming when Shoup published. His argument only worked if shared vehicles became normal. In 2005, thought experiment. In 2026, Waymo's operational model. One autonomous vehicle replaces 10 to 15 privately owned cars. At full deployment, urban parking demand doesn't decline, it collapses. A 2024 simulation, 95% less parking in shared city. Not an advocacy projection, from a transportation planning journal. Evidence hierarchy matters here, corporate claim versus peer review. The 95% figure, peer-reviewed modeling, International Transport Forum. Modeling assumes full shared adoption. Not there, trajectory is real. Singapore gave us the only real-world city-scale test. Vehicle ownership fell 15% in 3 years. AV zones. This wasn't modeled, this was measured, preprint, but measured. 2 threads so far: safety data, urban economics, parallel. They've never been the same conversation, until this year. When safety threshold met land economics, neither predicted this. Here's where it changes. Planning legislation cited AV safety data. Parking reform advocates argued for decades without being heard. One field was waiting for the other. Neither knew it. Now the two conversations are merging, implications cascading. When Waymo's 91% figure entered parking reform legislation, planners finally had the evidence base they'd been missing. Here's the fork, the scenario fork where this story divides. In 2040, shared autonomous vehicles dominate, cities redesigned. In the other, private autonomous vehicles proliferate, parking just relocates. Which future arrives depends on a regulatory decision made now. The Deloitte report on autonomous deployment makes this distinction clear. Shared fleet, 95% parking reduction. Private AV, minimal change. This is where the technology story becomes a policy story. Waymo delivers the safety transformation regardless of policy, already happening. Urban redesign requires cities to proactively change their zoning. Some cities are moving: Minneapolis, Buffalo, Austin, San Jose. These cities aren't waiting for AVs, they're legislating ahead. Others are watching, waiting for the housing affordability dividend. Housing affordability data accelerates this. Mayors respond to housing costs. Systems lens. Autonomous vehicles aren't just a transportation technology. They're a land use technology, most consequential since the interstate. Interstate reshaped 70 years of cities. This reshapes the next. Donald Shoup published his landmark work in 2005, age 65. He's now 86. Research cited in 40 states parking legislation. Dr. Goodenough published battery work at 57, Nobel at 97. Both men's work arrived early. Both waited for the world. Here's the economic cascade that nobody's talking about yet. When parking land frees, urban supply increases, housing costs fall. When costs fall, city centers become accessible to middle incomes. When centers become accessible, property taxes rise. Cities become solvent. This is the cascade technology enables, not inevitable, empirically plausible. But here's what the optimists understate, and it's significant. Traffic signal infrastructure costs $700 million yearly nationwide. 25% AV adoption, enables signal-free intersections in simulation. Simulation models, not yet proven at scale in real deployments. The first signal-free city will be doing something never done. First traffic light installed in Cleveland, Ohio, 1914. 112 years of signals. Some districts end this decade. That's where these two stories converge. Neither field predicted. The Cascade changes how you travel, and the city itself. What does this mean for the city you're living in? Los Angeles County, 14% of all land area, parking. San Bernardino, 49% downtown parking. Phoenix, 36% total. This is frozen economic potential, trillions in locked land value. Academic research is consistent. More land supply reduces housing costs. Not every city, not same pace, but the finding holds. But the Cascade has a dark branch. Optimists understate it. AVs eliminate 40,000 deaths. They also eliminate 4 million jobs. Truck drivers, taxi drivers, delivery workers, first wave of displacement. Science journalism, not advocacy. Evidence shows both consequences. Insurance industry faces parallel disruption. 90% fewer crashes. Means the entire auto insurance market model collapses. Auto repair, parking enforcement, gas stations, the second-order cascade. This transition has historical parallels. The horse and buggy industry in 1910. Displaced workers, new industries emerged. The net positive historically. Net positive doesn't mean painless. It means survivable with preparation. BCG 2026 names it directly. They call it evolution threshold. Commercialization is no longer a question. The question is speed. Waymo, targeting 1 million trips weekly by end of 2026. Tesla Cybercab, targeting 2 million units yearly at full capacity. These are corporate projections, not peer-reviewed forecasts, worth distinguishing. Deployment trajectory is peer-reviewed, and it points one direction. Here's the framework you can take away from this episode. Thread 1. AV safety is no longer research, it's commercial. Thread 2. Urban parking economics are reversible. Legislation is moving. Thread 3. Convergence is a policy decision, not technological inevitability. Every city is watching this. Here's the question to ask. Not will AVs arrive, they're here, who will they serve? Technology doesn't decide its distribution, policy does, as always. 2040, city redesigned. Other, traffic jams become bot jams. Research is clear which requires action, and which requires inaction. Shoup's research gives the framework, still there, now actionable. Waymo's safety data gives cities the evidence to move quickly. The boldest prediction here isn't mine, it's in the data. The last parking minimum repeal is happening now, right now. Nobody's covering it, it's not trending, but it's compounding. The generation that heard parking is given discovers it isn't. 2 fields, 2 researchers who never met, 1 unpredicted future. That's not a coincidence. That's how the future always arrives. Next week, longevity science meets economics nobody planned for.